Hey, Clint.
Hi, Brigid.
If you were to be hoisted on your own petard, what type of petard would it be, and in what way would you be hoisted?
I've been thinking about this, and I think that the most likely way would be if I had a podcast where I talked about being a lawyer too much, and then I was disbarred for doing that, and then I had to be a full-time podcaster. That would be just absolutely catastrophic.
I think that people would love that.
Yeah. What about you?
I'm really not sure, but I think it would have something to do with chihuahuas.
Likely. That makes sense. Devoured whole by chihuahuas.
To shreds, you say.
Push the button.
Hello, and welcome to the Mercy of Pods, the world's first and only podcast about the Captives of War series by James S.A. Corey. Except today, we will not be discussing the Captives of War. Today, we are going deeper into the Expanse universe with the very first chronological part of the story, the very first novella, Drive. That's right, folks. We have now expanded from the first and only podcast about the Captives of War to the first and only podcast that started about the Captives of War and is now at least nominally about the Expanse, at least until we have more Captives of War content. Still workshopping the tagline, but that's what we're going with for now.
Snappy. My first read-through of The Expanse, I've only read it through the whole thing once, and that didn't include all the novellas, but it was mostly, because it was mostly an Amos fact-finding mission, I was just like, I need to know what happens to this guy. So rereading with interest in the whole universe of it has been really fun, because as it happens, a lot of these characters are cool.
Yeah, we're going to meet some cool characters today, I think.
Right now.
Do you want to get started since you wrote the summary of Drive?
I do. Here we go. We open on Solomon being crushed into his captain's chair by the unexpectedly strong force of acceleration. His limbs are pinned down by the G's, and his primate brain is flooding him with adrenaline and alarm. His yacht is also sounding alarms that tell Solomon he's accelerating at upwards of 7 Gs. His view of space before him is empty of any landmarks, only stars. Though his heart is pounding from the stress, he's also elated. His space yacht is running pretty well, even though he's souped it up considerably with aftermarket modifications. A minor system has gone offline from the unexpected thrust, but he'll be able to figure out why when he returns from this test flight. This is the first in a long string of things going a little wrong, but not quite wrong enough.
Yeah, this recurring theme of not quite enough failure to save yourself is really well done. They seed it throughout the story. Saul is constantly pointing out things that could have saved his life, but, well, they worked too well. And it's also, I think, really great framing for the broader themes about Mars and Earth at this part of their history not being at quite enough odds to really break apart. There's not enough failure to go to war. There's just enough to make things uncomfortable. And that's where Saul is, too.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't think of that. Next, Solomon tries to lift his hand to use the ship's control panel, but finds it feels much heavier than it should. He must be way above 7 Gs, but he won't be able to tell how far above until he gets back and can look at the sensor data.
So Saul says he doesn't really know what's happening because the sensors are, quote, pegged, which seems a little anachronistic because the sensors here are almost certainly not analog dials like an old speedometer. Like I had a 1985 Pontiac Fiero that was a V6. It weighed like 14 pounds. It was the fastest fucking thing. And the speedometer would peg out at 85 miles an hour, which was crazy because I would like drive down to LA on 5 and I would get 10 miles a gallon on a 10-gallon tank. I do want to point that out. But I was going like well into the triple digits and it would tell me I was going 85. This reminds me of what Saul is doing here, but he says it's pegged. And I don't know about that phrasing. It doesn't really make a ton of sense to me, but maybe he means, Brigid, maybe he means pegged in the sexier colloquial sense. Just a thought.
Yeah, those dials and gauges are not able to give him data because they're busy doing things with their rear ends.
Sure. It's possible.
We don't know their business. In trying to lift his hand, Saul dislocates his elbow or something. Something gross and bad happens. He realizes he won't be able to shut off the drive he redesigned. So embarrassing. And he will have to wait until the fuel runs out and he can be rescued from wherever he ends up. which might be problematic because he's going super fucking fast and the rescue ship won't have this fancy drive. So it's going to take them a long time to get there. The G-force is distorting his freaking eyeballs, but nevertheless, Solomon is able to read the fuel gauge, which is dropping at a disturbingly slow rate. Some quick math reveals that the burn is going to last 37 hours, and he is going at 5% of the speed of light. This is when Solomon finally starts to get nervous.
Yeah, he talks a little bit about how he feels like he's suffocating, and it recalls a bit of Birjar's statement about how sometimes, that we covered in Oberon, Birjar's statement about how he sometimes thinks that he's drowning at the bottom of a sea of air. So Saul is like Birjar, suffocating without anything visible to cut off his air, which, I don't know, is a recurring theme, I suppose. But also, Brigid, I think it's a cool idea to write a story where they just give away the protagonist's death right away. What do you think about this idea? And is it spoilers?
It is spoilers. It's unconscionable.
Yes.
It's pretty cool how many drowning metaphors there are and suffocating, because this is all set in space where the threat of suffocation is like the main thing to be scared of, but hardly anyone suffocates in space in this series. They all just always feel like they're going to.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Unless, you get put out of an airlock or whatever.
Sure.
We time travel to 10 years earlier when Solomon meets, quote unquote, her. He is a researcher at Danbad Nova. Humanity has been on Mars for 3 generations. In that time, Danbad Nova has grown to support 5 whole bars, albeit bars that serve the same chow as the commissary and the research center. Solomon's work group likes to gather at one of these bars a few times a week. The group is small and tight-knit, much like Mars overall. It's a big, small town. This time, there's someone new, a striking woman with dark hair and a face a little too sharp for classic beauty.
More like down bad, Nova. Am I right?
Yeah.
There's this great quote. It says, Solomon didn't believe in love at first sight, but as soon as he sat down at the table, he was profoundly aware that he hadn't brushed his hair very effectively this morning, and he was wearing the shirt with the sleeves a little too long, which is very relatable. I think we've all been there. But pro tip, gentlemen, always, 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 always cuff your sleeves on all your shirts all the time. If it's a long sleeve shirt, roll it up to your forearms. At least if it's short sleeve, roll it up as far as it'll fucking go. Even t-shirts, it makes you look a little gay, which is a very good thing.
Girls only want one thing, and it's for guys to seem a little gay.
Exactly.
Ricker knows that, and that's why it would be cool if Solomon and Ricker knew each other.
I agree.
The group is comparing Mars and Earth to combatants in history. Tori says Mars is America because Mars is 4 months away from Earth, and America was 2 months away from Europe in the 1500s when the colonization of the Americas began. Too far away to be made to answer to the motherland. Furthermore, Tori exaggerates, Mars hardly needs anything from Earth and has better tech, better researchers, better beats, more bitches, more money. Voltaire says that's not true. And Solomon watches the new woman watch the debate. Malik and Tori go back and forth a bit more about Martian self-governance, and finally Tori brings up America coming to the aid of France in World War II, the favorite jingoist talking point, even for Martian jingoists.
So there's this whole bit about where the group describes how the Earth thinks of Mars like a distant lost colony and exploits Mars from far away, and then Malik says that they should declare independence, and Tori says that they have already effectively declared independence, so why do it formally? And look, whatever dissimilarities Mars has with the old American colonies that they're trying to, this analogy that they're trying to draw in this group, this to me is pretty similar to the period of what's called salutary neglect, if you remember from AP US history.
Of course.
During the pre-revolutionary period. This is like roughly the state of play that allowed the independence movement in the American colonies to coalesce, especially once Britain started engaging in what Thomas Jefferson would call a long train of abuses. And we see in this story the Earth engage in some of these abuses later. So there's clearly a connection here that the authors are trying to draw. So that's not to say that Saul is wrong, because unlike the American colonies, Mars does not have a huge agricultural base or, slaves or a native population that they can exploit that the U.S. used to defeat the British. And like someone else mentioned, they don't have the French riding in to save the day. So the analogy isn't perfect, but it's pretty apt. I like that discussion. Obviously, it pricked up my ears as an American history and political science nerd that I am.
Would you have gone with that comparison, or would you have picked some other ancient combatant like the Trojans or something?
No, because I would have gone with this comparison because that is incredibly my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Like I would say that I am a moderate expert on. No, I would say I'm an expert on American political constitutional
Do not be
history.
humble about this.
Yeah, I am not an expert on the Trojan War in any way, shape, or form. Yeah, no, like this is up my wheelhouse, so I would have gone with this for sure.
Yeah.
There's another note where you mentioned Voltaire, and speaking of things that I'm not quite an expert on, the author's notes mention that they think it's possible that the Voltaire mentioned here has something to do with the later old OPA faction, the Voltaire Collective. And I have a lot to say about the Voltaire Collective. Like every time the Voltaire Collective gets mentioned, my ears perk up. Most notably, that I've always thought it's weird that a radical faction of a revolutionary movement is named after some bigoted French monarchist from the Enlightenment. It seemed incongruous. So it makes me feel a lot better to think that the Voltaire at issue with the Collective is not the effete dork who wrote Candide, but somebody else.
Most likely it is somebody else, because I don't know if Voltaire is still going to be a reference 500 years after he was writing.
Probably not.
Candide is pretty funny, though.
Oh, it is. It's hilarious.
Solomon interrupts the rabble-rousing to say, actually, technologically, Mars is more like the Germans. There's like a record scratch here, and he gets nervous when the new woman turns her attention to him, and everyone else is like, we're not fascists, excuse me. But Solomon's point is not that they're politically like Germany, but that they had better technology and better scientists like Germany. But the Germans lost, quote, because even though one of their tanks was worth 5 of the other guys, America could build 10, unquote. The manufacturing base was so huge it could overwhelm Germany. What Mars therefore needed was a technological breakthrough that would shift the paradigm entirely.
Yeah, it's interesting to note that the story basically posits that this technological breakthrough is the Epstein drive, but that paradigm could equally be applied to Laconia's use of the protomolecule technology, which is the Martian use of the protomolecule technology. So too could Solomon's comparison to the Martians with the Germans. And, like if you look at it from the lens of looking at the Martians as being the progenitors of the Laconians, Solomon's comparison of the Martians to the Germans is a little bit more on point because they are fascist assholes.
Yeah. Yes. Or the comparison is also really on point with doing the protomolecule compared to World War II, because that was the nuclear bomb, was the technological breakthrough then. And
totally.
Doesn't it feed on radiation?
Yeah, I don't know. Probably. Oh, the protomolecule does.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not the atomic bomb. We don't know anything about that. We're not physicists.
How the atomic bomb works.
I've seen that movie twice, and I still don't know anything about it.
It's really good.
The movie?
Yes.
We finally disagree on something.
Oh, all right.
We'll do a special episode on Oppenheimer. The conversation shifts, and Solomon studiously avoids the new woman all evening, while being keenly aware of her every move. Crush accurately depicted. That unbearable thing where you have a honing beacon on the person, but you're scared to actually speak to them. He stays later than he means to, and when he leaves, he thinks about his longing to not live his whole life buried while heading for the rentable transport.
Another reference to suffocation there. Yeah.
Yeah, because they're underground. Like, all of this is happening deep underground. The hot and exciting new lady catches up with him and introduces herself as Caitlin Esquivel. They flirt a bunch, and Solomon asks her point blank if she wants to come home with him. She thinks about it. He knows she thinks about it, but she says, moving a little fast there, Saul. Haha. He likes to do that.
The author's notes mention how proud they are of this little joke. And frankly, I would be too. Well played, boys. Good for Saul for shooting his shot. Worst thing that can happen is she says no, which happens there. And there's also this great little bit where they're flirting, where she asks Saul what he does, and he says he's an engine engineer, and she says that seems redundant, and he says, yeah, but thrust specialist sounds too dirty, and that's just excellent wordplay. It's really good.
It is really good, and it's the first clue as to what's going to happen to Saul.
Yeah.
He specializes in improving thrust.
Indeed.
We switch back to the present when Solomon is realizing speed isn't the problem. It's the acceleration. He's going faster and faster, except that's not actually the problem either. The problem is efficiency. Normal engines can't contain enough fuel to sustain a burn for very long. This engine, the one he designed, can sustain this burn for hours. If only the magnetic bottle would become unstable or the reactor would overheat, the emergency shutoff would stop the drive, but nothing is going wrong. Everything is going perfectly, and thus this burn will never end. Solomon will keep accelerating forever, unless he can reach the manual cutoff. But he can't reach it because the g-force of the acceleration has pinned him to his chair. His heart is struggling to pump the blood through his body because of it. Then Solomon remembers his hand terminal in his front pocket. He scrapes his stomach trying to reach it because he can't lift his hand off his self, like he can't lift his hand. And the blood is a lubricant, making it slightly easier for his hand to move. As he's trying so hard to get his phone out of his pocket, he has a moment of pride that he's created this monster drive shooting him into the asshole of infinity.
The asshole of infinity. My God. Yeah, the bit with the hand terminal biting into his abdomen is so hard to read, just thinking about it.
Yeah, ouchie. One of the more painful ways to get hurt is with scraping. This part also reminds me of Prax's cascading failures in Caliban's War, where the failures like ratchet forward, making movement back away from failure progressively more challenging. We now fly back into the past when Earth has sent warships to Mars, and they will arrive in a few months. Caitlin, distraught, has come to Solomon's house to process their imminent demise. The two have known each other for 3 years and been together in one form or another for around 2.5. Caitlin seems to be keeping Solomon at arm's length emotionally to protect herself. He's okay with it because he just wants to be in her presence, whatever way she will allow. The Expanse is actually a universe of wife guys, and frankly, I could not love it more.
It is. More on this later. It's very good.
Caitlin is distraught because they are all going to die at the hands of Earth's Marines. Solomon holds her as she cries that Earth is going to glass the whole planet because a few secessionists published a manifesto.
Yeah, it's not like the UN found WMDs or evidence of yellow cake or something. Certainly, the member states of the UN Security Council would never gin up a flimsy excuse to invade a resource-rich but cash-poor sovereign state. Don't worry, Caitlin. Everything will be fine.
Yeah, world leaders act above board all the time.
Absolutely.
Solomon reassures her that Earth has too great a financial stake in Mars to glass them. Caitlin says, I don't know, we may have better ships, but they have more ships. They sent 40 and we only have 18 on the whole planet. So, if you only had 3 months to live, what would you do? He replies that he would spend it in bed with her, which is a good answer.
Phenomenal answer. Our boy is smooth.
He's got a lot of riz. In the morning, he wakes up and asks her to marry him, thinking if they will only be alive a short time, he wants her to be her husband as long as he can. The ceremony is described as small and intimate, officiated by their close friends.
Just like yours?
Oh, yeah. You were there. It was great. Your wedding was like an elegant affair of state.
Oh.
It was lovely.
It was nice.
The authors take a moment to describe the beauty of the chapel, which is made of the native stone of Mars. This is an interesting narrative contrast to the next passage, in which Solomon thinks he's almost pretending to be an earther by taking their honeymoon at a resort in Danbad Nova, modeled after what's considered luxurious on Earth. On the one hand, Mars has its own innate beauty. On the other, even a few generations in, Martians still look to Earth for aesthetic and sensorial inspiration.
There's a passage earlier where Saul is described as Martian since birth, which with a body that makes it unmistakable, and it's from Saul's POV. So he seems almost sheepish about it. He's like really tall and gangly, and so like he knows that Caitlin can tell that he's Martian. And this passage also plays on that duality of being humans, or humans from Earth, but also not from Earth, which is obviously a recurring theme in the Expanse.
This is one place that the show, I think, is significantly weaker than the books because there's so much narrative heft in the bodies of the different people being different. Like, Martians are taller, and the Belters are even taller and thinner.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. There was no way to depict that, I guess, in a show, but it's cool in the books. While they're on honeymoon, the Earth fleet turns back, and Mars is safe again for now. Solomon, bless his nerd heart, asks Caitlin if she wants a divorce now that they aren't about to die. Caitlin sweetly reassures him that she still wants to be married, and anyway, things would change again next time Earth gets antsy about its molybdenum reserves. Forever could shorten back up any time. Solomon reiterates that this will continue unless technological shift makes the question irrelevant. That's what peace is, right? Caitlin says. postponing the conflict until the thing you are fighting over doesn't matter.
Entire political science departments have collapsed into a black hole of irrelevance after reading this passage. Devastated.
We're back in the yacht with Solomon. He's gotten the hand terminal partway out of his pocket, giving himself a giant bruise in the process. If he left voice activation on, this would be a lot easier, but of course he didn't, or maybe the G's have distorted his voice too much for it to work. He has to flex nonstop to stay awake, but it's getting hard to remember to do that. He gets the hand terminal out of his pocket and into his hand, and an alert pops up on the ship's monitor. He can't read what it says, but it fails to reach a critical point that would trigger a shutdown, so it's useless. Caitlin. He needs to call Caitlin. She'll be at their hole by now. She can remotely shut off the drive. Unless she thinks he butt-dialed her, how is he going to keep her from thinking that? Solomon struggles with the hand terminal while realizing that this invention of the drive means ships can be under thrust for their whole voyages. Acceleration halfway, deceleration the rest. They'll be able to travel much, much further without the problems of long-term weightlessness or the burden of larger loads of reaction mass. Due to chaos theory, the hand terminal falls out of reach, and Solomon can't make his arm move to reach for it. He's having a stroke. Oh no.
Chaos theory, just like Ian Malcolm. And so I've decided, because you said this, that my headcanon for Saul is a young Jeff Goldblum.
I'll go ahead and incorporate that. He's got the riz.
Mm-hmm.
Flashback to 3 years ago when Solomon took a bunch of his and Caitlin's money and bought a boat. Just a little boat. He needs it to test his experimental engines. Caitlin is like, well, that sounds really fun, and I wish you would have talked with me so I could be in on the fun instead of the sucker-ass narc of the situation. She says, you zoomed ahead without thinking at all about what it would mean, which is definitely a thing Solomon does.
Yeah, there's a part here where she says that she's not mad about the boat necessarily, but that she's mad about the fact that he's making her be the bad guy, the adult who has to tut-tut an extravagant purchase. And this is absolutely correct, but if I have one critique about the Expansiverse, and it's a small critique, it's that too many people have these incredibly wise and self-aware bon mots. It's not that they're wrong, they're not. It's just that they're so right, it doesn't always feel entirely real because everyone has this incredible head on their shoulders. Whereas in real life, like most people, even the smartest people, are dumb and petty as shit and don't say stuff like this on a regular basis. So that stood out to me because I think she would have every right to be like mad, pissed, but she, has this really like mature way of looking at it that I think doesn't always feel super authentic.
Yes, I totally agree. It's a problem in a lot of fiction. It's like Sorkinitis a little bit. Yeah. Usually it takes, like, I could see someone coming to this conclusion after the end of a long conversation with a lot of processing, or even a big fight and then a long conversation. But the conclusions they just skip the whole fight part and just do a little scrapbook caption of like, and then we learned to clue each other in. Solomon is like, yeah, you're right, partly because she is, and partly because he doesn't want to tell her how much yacht maintenance costs. Life goes on. By day, Solomon does his research work for the center. By night, he does his own design research. Caitlin joins a fairly high-level sounding group that wants to use large corporations to stabilize the Earth-Mars relationship.
Corporations controlling the relationship between Earth and Mars? What could possibly go wrong?
Sounds great. Caitlin works for the Kwiatkowski Corp, which is important in its future amalgamated form of Mal Kwiatkowski in the main Expanse plot.
Oh, that's what could go wrong. Yeah.
She's particularly activist around the issue of ore rights. As long as Earth needs molybdenum, their relationship will be fraught. Solomon says this very condescending thing about Caitlin doing really well despite having to overcome a liberal arts degree. Hey.
Tough but fair.
Finally, Solomon is ready to test his theoretical engine design. He takes a long tube journey to the shipyards and does some stuff to the yacht's drive. The diagnostics come back clear, so he takes her out to high orbit and has a cup of tea while jetting off into space. His bubble gets popped, though, when he checks his readouts at the end of the test flight and finds his predicted 16% improvement in efficiency has actually been a 4.5% drop in efficiency, dagnabbit.
As the proud holder of a liberal arts degree, I definitely follow what's going on here. It's true.
Numbers.
I got this.
Life goes on between Earth and Mars, too. Earth makes laws and Mars flouts them. Rumors of war start and are ignored. Caitlin and Solomon's little friend group does various adult things, like quit their horrible development job, to become a potter, have a gay baby, and take lucrative secret government contracts. Solomon keeps working on his designs, gradually meeting and then exceeding the unmodified efficiency of his ship's engine. Today, when the present is catching up to the flashback, he has a new design that he predicts will increase efficiency by 4.5%. On the way, Caitlin calls with an old married couple scheduling question. Solomon says he'll likely be working that weekend and make plans without him. He makes his final adjustments and takes the ship up to high orbit to prepare for his test burn. While he does so, he remembers that actually he won't be working that weekend. Maybe it's not too late for Caitlin to cancel the other plans. Satisfied?
Yeah, you won't be working that weekend. That's true.
Satisfied that he is prepared for all contingencies, Solomon straps in and begins the burn sequence. And we hear again that acceleration has thrown Solomon back into the captain's chair. We're completely caught up with the beginning of the story. Now we skip ahead to where we had left off. Solomon can't reach his hand terminal and he has had a stroke. The ship is making a low creaky sound that reminds him of his father singing at temple. Solomon's Jewish. He is for sure going to die and he knows it. He's going too fast and too far for help to ever be able to reach him.
For a while, months or years, his little yacht will mark the farthest out of Earth's gravity well a manned ship has ever gone.
Chills. He knows Caitlin will find the plans and know how to sell them. Other ships will be built with his drive, and it will carry humans to the asteroid belt, to Ganymede and Europa. He won't be the first to go to those places, but those who do will get there because of him. Mars has just made that paradigm-shifting technological leap, Solomon realizes. Mars is effectively closer to Earth than Earth is to Mars because Mars can get there faster using his drive. Plus, they'll have access to all the molybdenum and other rare minerals they need in the asteroid belt.
The thing that kept Earth and Mars from ever reaching a lasting peace isn't going to matter anymore.
Solomon has won. Not only will Caitlin be financially taken care of, she'll also be safe. And his people will be safe, the Martians, and Solomon's name will live forever, which is good because his body is getting close to the end. He's having auditory hallucinations and grieving that he won't be able to say goodbye to Caitlin. Solomon feels at peace in this moment because he is like Moses, who saw the promised land but died before entering it as the Lord decreed.
I love this part.
Me too.
This is such a great quote. There's a quote that says, "He wonders if that's what makes the promised land holy, that you can see it, but you can't quite reach it. The next few years, decades, going to be fascinating, and it will be because of him." He closes his eyes. He wishes he could be there to see it all happen.
Finn.
And
oh, it's beautiful, that last little bit.
Yeah, that last little bit, that you the deathbed FOMO, right, that you put in the notes, it's absolutely the strongest passage of the story to me, and the thing that stands out every time I reread it, because with the exception of like literally Holden in the last chapter of Leviathan Falls, we don't get this kind of near-death reflection from folks in the Expanse, or discussion or thoughts about what it means to be at your end, but at the beginning of the rest of history. It's an incredibly weighty thing to think about. And the way that Saul thinks about it here, especially given that it's at this sort of birth moment for the Martian Republic, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later, is really interesting and really fascinating. And again, like, Saul is thinking quite a bit here about legacy. Saul is reflecting on his legacy as he passes away. There's that part you mentioned about how, the reason Mars will be able to break away from Earth is because of him, that his name will live on the test of time. So he is having this realization about his own legacy. Saul doesn't have kids. The story makes that clear. He doesn't have a company. He's not like head of the Solomon Epstein company. He's not a teacher or an artist that leaves behind art. His legacy is the drive. And while he's dying, he gets the chance to feel some satisfaction that at least he'll have that. And at least Caitlin will have that. Caitlin will be able to profit off of his legacy. And thinking about legacy is one of those things that people, especially people who don't have kids, don't get to do a lot of in literature, I don't think, or at least I haven't seen a whole lot of it. And as someone who is of a certain age and who also won't have kids, it's something that I think about too, about what is my legacy that I leave behind. And I love that we get this exploration of death mixed with the tangible things that you leave behind, even when they're not like offspring. So like Drive isn't my favorite novella in The Expanse, by any stretch of the imagination, but this last few paragraphs where we're inside Saul's head when he's dying is some of the best writing in the series in my view. I just really, really love it.
It is really good. I kind of for a minute was like, really, is there not that much in literature about legacy? Because I feel like a lot of characters do talk about what they'll be leaving behind, but they all have kids. So
right.
we'd have to, I don't have kids, and I always wish I could like be immortal so I could see what's going to happen. So if you know any vampires.
Yeah. I mean, you like, we do get a lot of discussion, for example, from Alex in The Expanse, and to a certain extent from Avasarala in The Expanse. And I guess, I don't know that Bobby thinks about legacy as much as she thinks about her own place in the universe and like whether or not she lived her life well. But like it's a big theme for Alex because he has kids, and obviously it's like comes up in the last few books and in the before the 30-year break, he's trying to shore up his legacy by making nice with his wife and his kids and all that kind of stuff. And we just don't get that for the rest of the series for a lot of different reasons. And I just really like this part.
Yeah.
So what about wife guys?
How about these wife guys? There's so many.
Yeah, The Expanse, absolutely full of them. There's like this club of kind of unspectacular but solid ancillary characters who are like the devoted husbands of their vastly more talented and interesting and important wives. Just, off the top of my head, you've got Arjun, you've got Joseph, you've got Fayez, Saba, Holden. The list goes on and on.
Yeah. They are mostly the less talented. I like you saying that Holden is less spectacular than Naomi because
yes, exactly.
It's so true.
See what I did there?
But it's interesting that most of them, their wife is way more spectacular than they are. And I wouldn't say Caitlyn's not spectacular, but she's kind of just like, the business bitch.
Sure.
And meanwhile, Saul is a genius inventor that creates something that changes the universe. So he is like the fancy one, but he like thinks his wife he did it all for her, From what I've listened to of Ty and that guy, these guys are wife guys. Like they really think their wives are cool and like more talented than them. I think Ty's wife is a scientist or something. I don't know anything about Daniel's wife. She's not on the podcast. But I love that for The Expanse and for us readers because when the authors think women are people, it makes for a much richer narrative.
Interesting. Women as people. Fascinating.
Now that's sci-fi.
Yeah.
How about Moses?
Yeah. I mean, Solomon brings up Moses. We got this reference to the thing that is killing him being like the songs that are sung in temple. And in a lot of ways, Solomon's victory is Mars's victory, just like Moses's victory was the Israelites' victory. And they both delivered their people from the wilderness, in a sense, to the promised land. And for Saul, he if you want to extend the metaphor, he parted the seas of space and gave Mars safe passage.
Yeah.
But also, it's an origin story for the independent Martian Republic in the same way that, Moses' story is the origin story for the Israelites. The characters in the drive, we get that, part that they spend a decent amount of time on where all of their friends are actively debating the question of independence. So in a way, Saul's death is the genesis of Mars itself, or what political scientists would call the sort of constitutional moment, which is a phrase that political scientists like to use. The way that's described is government is reworked. The formal structures of government are reworked due to forces outside that structure. So the American constitutional moment is the Revolutionary War or the Civil War, those types of things. They're outside the structure, but it remakes the structures of government. And that's pretty similar to what happens with Saul here. And I just want to note that it's very interesting to read this novella back to back with the one that we're going to cover next week. Or next week, I don't know when it's going to come out next time, because as we'll see, the butchering of Anderson Station also functions as something of a constitutional moment for the belt in the same way that this technological breakthrough does for Mars.
Yeah. The passage in Deuteronomy where God shows Moses the promised land that he'll never see because it isn't God's will is so poignant.
Yeah.
It's not like, it's not depicted as like a punishment or a lesson. He didn't do something wrong. It's just not God's will for Moses to live anymore. And it's kind of peaceful the same way that Solomon is at the end. And Moses's grave is in an unknown location. In the Bible, they're like, nobody knows where he was laid, much the way that Solomon is interred deep in space where he can't really be found.
That's really interesting. So what is the sort of, or do you have thoughts on, if we're looking at the Bible as literature, what the, narrative purposes of like not being able to enter the promised land or the kingdom of, or not the kingdom of heaven, but the promised land? Is that, what is the, like, why is that something that is important to these stories, do you think?
I'm really not sure. The Bible as literature is pretty thorny, but I think it could be that thing of like society is good when old men plant trees they'll never sit under or whatever. Maybe it's like you're the founder of your people is like things that are good for the people is unlikely to pay off in your lifetime.
There you go. Love that.
I look forward to learning more about the Bible as a lifelong Catholic. Well, I'm not Catholic now, but
Sure.
Never really goes away.
So what about you put it here in the notes, parallels with Frankenstein. What do you think?
There's not really that many, but when he's realizing that he's just going to shoot off into space forever, and this drive that he put so much work into is killing him. It reminded me of when Dr. Frankenstein is chasing his creation into Antarctica, I think, or maybe the Arctic, and it's just like floating ice for miles and miles, and he's definitely going to die.
Yeah, I think it's the North Pole, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Killed by one's own creation.
Yeah.
Yeah, Steph and I saw Frankenstein the ballet.
Oh, yeah.
Last weekend. I didn't really think about the drive much because, there was a lot of like twirling and stuff because it's ballet. But it was very good. I mean, Frankenstein just whips. It's such an amazing story.
It whips so
hard.
Yeah,
absolutely.
There's also a lot of parallels with the inventor of the Segway.
Because the inventor of the Segway drove it off a cliff, right?
Yeah. He shot into the abyss as well.
That is the Solomon Epstein. He drove it into the abyss. Yeah. Oh man, amazing.
You're inventing something that would change humanity forever. What do you think about the time loop story structure?
I really like it. This is the first novella that James S.A wrote, I think, that uses this conceit, this sort of we are jumping back and forth in time. It's also used in Butcher. It's also used in The Vital Abyss, and of course in Live Suit. This, just from like a mechanical perspective, this is almost the exact story structure of Live Suit in the sense that like when it jumps back, it's chronological, jumping back and forth. And there's a part where in Butcher, because I'm writing the summary of Butcher is not chronological in the same way. I'm interested to see whether Vital Abyss is, but yeah, I enjoy stories like this, especially when, as we talked about at the beginning, we know from the very beginning that Saul dies. Like, I think it's very clear from the very first part that Saul is dead. And so the suspense of the story is not about whether or not he's going to die, because we know he's going to die. The suspense is like, how did he get here? And so, like, same thing with Butcher. We know when we start reading Butcher what's going to happen to Fred Johnson. He's going to end up with the OPA. So the suspense is not, how it ends up. It's just how do you get there? And I think that the time loop story structure is a really interesting way to bring that out.
I totally agree. And that is exactly why I find outcry about spoilers often to be so frustrating, because you can know what happened and still be fascinated by how you get there.
Right.
The loop structure is really strong. It's very satisfying to read, and it's a great way to throw the reader into something urgent that's happening right now, but still work in the backstory. Whereas like a linear narrative, the tension builds differently. And the loop really works with Live Suit and Drive because they're also about the way that distance impacts time and speed impacts time.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and like in Live Suit, it's almost implied that time is looping a little bit.
Sure.
And then in Butcher, I think it's more like a psychological and emotional loop versus like the technological looping. Speaking of which, is Caitlin in the Heritage Foundation?
I think it's possible. So she's like, yeah, it's corporations will save us, bro. And it's like literally neoliberalism.
Yeah.
I realize that term doesn't mean anything anymore, but like literally neoliberalism, when I learned about it in college, is like conditioning democracy and peace on corporate interests, or at least intertwining them with corporate interests such that they're more stable that way. That's the theory behind neoliberalism as I was taught it.
And it's working great.
It's working great. I mean, here we are. Everything's
couldn't
fantastic.
be more stable.
Right. I love the bit that you pointed out where Caitlin unwittingly sows the seeds of Mal Kwiatkowski's threatening of Mars's survival, because, and so, like, the question of, is she in the Heritage Foundation? I don't know, but like effectively it's the same thing, because, from her perspective, if it helps the bottom line of the Kwiatkowski Corporation, it must be good for everyone. Molybdenum is important, and so we're just providing a service, right? Everything's going to be okay.
As long as the shareholders are, the fiduciary duty to the shareholders is being upheld, then really, what else do we have to worry about? Ethically, politically, morally?
Nothing.
Existentially?
Nothing whatsoever.
All we care about is that fiduciary duty.
Making those dividends. It's like money, money, money. So I guess the last thing that we care about is, what are the thematic connections to either the Captive's War or to the main Expanse that we should talk about? What do you feel like? First of all, do you think that there's any thematic connections to the Captive's War? Let's get that one out of the way.
I think the theme of space being huge and you can't even comprehend, the distance becomes time because it's so incomprehensibly vast. That's a big theme.
Yeah. And
then also like technology changing, like a technological breakthrough changing the course of humanity's future a lot.
Yeah, it does feel like LiveSuit a bit. It's a technological advance that has incredible uses, but also brings with it horror and exploitation, which is, you can say that the Epstein drive is a wonderful thing, but it's what makes the exploitation of the belt possible. Explicitly, that's what it does.
Yeah.
And it also ends up making, imperiling human society, because they find the protomolecule and then they exploit it, and then they open the ring gates, and et cetera, et cetera. And so like it's the seed there. And, LiveSuit isn't exactly like that, because LiveSuit is just like a tool of war that's created in the middle of the war. But at the same time, that's the idea, right?
Yeah, struggling with the evil sides of technology while still kind of needing to advance technology, because that's what humans do. And also in LiveSuit, they're trying to survive in a war.
Yeah. So what about with the Expanse? I mean, are there broader themes of the Expanse that we haven't touched on already that you think are reflected in this story?
Well, I think they say it in the author's note, but there are several characters that don't get to see the fruits of their labor. Fred and Avasarala, and a lot of people, actually. Holden.
Right? Yeah.
Pretty fascinating. Duarte, kind of.
Yeah. I think what this story does, if you are reading The Expanse in chronological order, which I imagine that there are some people who did, right? Like I read Drive well after I read, I think, the first 6 books, if I recall correctly. Maybe even after I read the first 7 or 8. And I just sort of circled back to read Drive. And so if you're reading it in chronological order, I think it's a nice way to introduce the idea of geopolitics. And I use that word geopolitics incorrectly. Like the sort of, galactopolitics, I don't know what the phrase is, that is driving the story. And it's not just about, the fun, shooty, zoomy ships. It's about like there's a reason. There's a political, sociological reason why these sorts of advances are important, and also why these sorts of advances can have disastrous consequences attached to them. So we get that introduced in a nice way, a nice like tidy way, without a whole lot of bells and whistles. It's just like, this is, as I said, this is Mars's Genesis story, and it's attached to this like whiz bang thing, this magic, quasi magic scientific discovery, and that fundamentally shifts the playing field to just a massive degree, and we get to see the authors kind of playing in that sandbox to figure out what happens next because of this magic advance.
Yes, this story really does pack a lot of information about this world, a lot of backstory and exposition into a really entertaining and very short novella.
Yeah.
It's pretty impressive.
And the next novella that we're going to cover is not that much longer, honestly, but I think it is a little bit more dense, so I'm excited.
Me too.
Yeah.
Is that it?
I think that's it. I think that's it. We're keeping it tight, just like
quick
dry.
54-minute podcast.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, cool. Thanks, everybody. That was fun. Come back next time when we do The Butcher of Anderson Station.
Hell yeah. Follow us on Buzzsprout or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also send us an email at themercyofpods@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram or the socials in general at The Mercy of Pods. Also on YouTube at The Mercy of Pods. Our logo is by Matt Howes. Music is Push the Button by Sid Luscious and the Pants. Available wherever you get your music. And don't forget, folks, roll up those sleeves.
Or you'll be hoist on your own petard.
Push the button.